Straight up in the air. Rabada says mine, it is his day and the evening belong to South Africa.
It's October 12th, 2023, and honestly, could Australia have asked for a worse start to a World Cup? Tonight's loss to South Africa by 134 runs left them near the bottom of the World Cup standings. They had not only just lost to a contender, but it was on the back of losing their first match to hosts India. Five-time champions Australia are nearly always considered a contender for the World Cup, and now two chances to put down a marker as World Cup favourites now squandered. They had been out-bowled, out-batted and outfielded with so many missed chances. It was basically like their minds were somewhere else. But teams wearing the green and gold have met and overcome similar World Cup hurdles in the past. For the Aussies, however small it was, there was always a chance to prove that it's not over till it's over, and that they too can add to the rich World Cup history of the past, and to write their own. After you learn about the year that this Australian team has just had, you can better understand why they might be in this position. They're on the final stretch of what has been one of the most grueling and difficult cricket seasons away from home in decades. One that we've been chronicling in recent videos. It started in India, their latest attempt to overcome more than a decade of history at Fortress India was unsuccessful, losing the first two tests in a row before finishing the series 2-1. Their travels would then lead them to England, where although they won the World Test Championship Mace against that same Indian team, what followed was a tense, dramatic and ultimately bittersweet Ashes tour for Australia. The Ashes were retained rather than won outright. Like the India tour, this could have been seen as a missed opportunity, where the goal was no doubt much higher, but finished with just a pass mark. Some would argue by the skin of their teeth. At the helm of this team was Pat Cummins, a supremely talented cricketer who had increasingly shown the intangibles in certain moments that is required of a captain, but by the same token was still relatively new to the job, and had to experience the hard lessons that this job brings with it. While the uniforms had changed from white to coloured, much of the core team stayed the same. After roughly 5 weeks since the end of the Ashes, the Australian team were playing again, this time in South Africa, for 5 one-dayers, which was seen as the start of Australia's warm-up to the ICC World Cup tournament. Australia did not have their full-strength squad on hand, as many players were injured or being rested. Captain Pat Cummins, Steve Smith and Mitchell Starc were all out, not to mention star player Glenn Maxwell, who picked up an ankle injury in the first practice session of this tour. Playing in South Africa is tough, even with a full-strength side, but they won the first 2 matches, only to be hit with more injuries. Cameron Green got a concussion in the first game, which gave a chance to Marnus Labuschagne, a test regular but hadn't been picked in the initial ODI World Cup squad. Labuschagne was brought on as a concussion sub to score a match-winning partnership with Ashton Agar.
Agar was then ruled out of the World Cup because of a calf injury.
And even that wasn't the end of it. Travis Head would finish a losing third ODI with a fractured hand, leaving him in serious doubt for the World Cup. As the series wore on, South Africa started hitting their straps. Their vaunted batting order seemed to be in form just as the World Cup was around the corner.
Flat, skimming into the crowd, danger paid for those on the bank.
Australia struggled to slow the South African run rate, particularly in the death overs, or stop consecutive middle order collapses of their own, as big totals from the Proteas in the final 2 matches saw them come back and win the series 3-2. The next ODIs in India weren't much better either. Pat Cummins and Steve Smith returned, but India were too strong, winning the series 2-1. Depth options Spencer Johnson and Nathan Ellis also flew home mid-tour with injuries of their own. On watching these 2 series, die-hard Aussie fans might say that, of course they didn't win. Australia didn't have their full-strength side on the field, and that it was clear that they were trying new things in these 2 tours. The results didn't really matter all that much. While these things might be true, starting a World Cup with a 5-3 losing record in the previous 2 tours doesn't instill a lot of confidence. And the first 2 World Cup games were reality checks on just how far off the pace Australia was starting this World Cup. As we said earlier, the 2 losses left them close to the bottom of the table. Unless they turned things around in a massive way, they were going home empty-handed. Like another World Cup story of years past, Australia had created itself an arduous task in order to take World Cup gold. They might have been beaten by the toughest 2 teams the first time around, but now, if everything lined up just right, they would have 7 games to make sure that that didn't happen again. Sri Lanka were Australia's third opponents of this World Cup at Lucknow, an opportunity for a rebuild, and for not just the team, but in particular, one of Australia's most important players. Sri Lanka won the toss and chose to bat first. Mitchell Starc was out to set the tone from ball one, but with aplomb, Pereira and Pathum Nissanka capitalised on any over-pitch deliveries or wide ones. A big start was underway. Sri Lanka reached 50 in 9 overs and 100 in 17 and a half, both openers making 50. Was this a repeat of before? Not this time. Captain Pat Cummins brings himself on and gets both openers within 6 overs.
Straight through. Cummins has struck again. He gets his second.
Sri Lanka definitely off to the races, but now had to create a new momentum. The ball is thrown to Adam Zampa, Australia's lone specialist spinner in the tournament. He had gotten off to a slow start in the first 2 matches, but if Australia wanted to win this trophy, they needed him. The small opening created by Cummins was forced wide open by Zampa. Back-to-back wickets, leaving Sri Lanka 4 for 166.
Given out. Joel Wilson says yes.
He started a collapse. From then on, Charitha Salanka would be the only batter to pass double digits as regular wickets fell. Zampa, Starc and Maxwell all chipping in. Even this Cummins rocket from the field. What started as a total heading towards the 300s had been brought back to 209 all out in 43.5 overs. There were still aspects in the field that needed polishing, but all around a much better performance. David Warner and Mitch Marsh followed the impetus of Starc, but a roaring Dilshan Madhushanka got 1, then 2 to swing and keep low. Warner and Smith gone before the 4th over with a double wicket maiden. The prospect of another Aussie batting collapse front and centre. Marsh bashes his way to 50 while the Australian middle order worked together to bring the total ever closer. This time around, there just wasn't enough runs for Sri Lanka to defend. Australia registering their first victory of the tournament, chasing down 210 in 35.5 overs. 2 points on the table and a boost to their net run rate. It was a glimmer of hope, if only faint, that Australia weren't dead and buried just yet. 4 days later would see Australia's next match against Pakistan at the Chinnaswamy Stadium in Bengaluru. Typically as close to a batter's paradise that you can find in India, but Pakistan won the toss and chose to field, maybe expecting dew later on in the night. The pitch was a belter, Marsh and Warner out to make the most of the pace on the ball and the short boundaries. Warner again almost got out cheaply, just like against Sri Lanka. Hadu Samamia held on to this catch. It was one of the big what-ifs of this match, as the 2 openers would bash the ball to all parts of the ground for the next 30-odd overs. Babar Azam, trying all of his options, watched as all of them got the same treatment.
That is terrific. That is magnificent.
The opening onslaught that had been present in so many of Australia's World Cup victories of the past seemed to be getting together here. It just kept going on and on. They were still in the middle by the 20th over, by the 25th, by the 30th, scoring over 200 runs by that point. The partnership would finally come to an end in the 34th over, Husam Amir taking the chance to dismiss Mitch Marsh over 250 runs later. 10 fours and 9 sixes coming from his bat alone. Australia won for 259. Warner would continue to push Australia all the way past 300 until he was out for 163, 14 fours and 9 sixes of his own. However, no other batter was able to match the heights of the opening pair, with regular wickets and another middle order collapse. By the 50th over, Pakistan had managed to dismiss Australia to 9 down. Shaheen Shah Afridi with a 5 of 10 overs, 367 would be the final score. Australia's biggest total of the tournament so far, but at Bengaluru, with the potential for dew at night, one which might not be enough. Pakistan had won 2 of their first 3 matches, and similar to Australia, started with a big opening partnership. Abdullah Shafiq and Imam ul Haq getting their team going. On this pitch, under lights, Australia was having just as much trouble as Pakistan was, and a missed chance popped its head up again.
Yeah, will this be taken? And no!
Only to be punished some more by these openers. Both scoring a half century each themselves. Someone needed to come in and make a breakthrough. That someone was Marcus Stoinis. Shafiq gone for 64, and 1 over later, Imam ul Haq gone for 70. Around half of Pakistan's overs were still left, over 200 runs still needed to reach the target at a run rate of 8.2, with Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan looking to make one of their signature match-winning partnerships. It seemed like a moment in the game where earlier this year, Pat Cummins might have let the game drift, even if it was in a different format. Leaving a bowler on for a fraction too long, maybe even letting the runs come too easily for the batters, to let them get settled. But here, we saw that Cummins had almost learnt from previous events. The game could be won starting right here. Hazlewood was working hard to hold up one end, but he brings Adam Zampa on from the other, who gets Babar Azam with his second ball.
Terrific!
Saud Shakil replaces him, and both Hazlewood and Zampa go for 10 and 9 runs respectively in their next 2 overs. Both are quickly replaced by Stark and Maxwell. They both get 2 overs each before again Cummins brings himself on to pick up Saud Shakil, now on 30 with Stoinis on from the other end. Those were the 2 massive wickets, Pakistan 3 for 232. But this is the Chinnaswamy. As long as there's batters out there, runs will continue to come and most run rates would be within reach. The regular cycling of bowling options by Cummins was continually giving Pakistan different looks to try and unsettle them. Ultimately, it paid off, bringing Hazlewood and Zampa back on from the 39th over. They would get Iftikhar, along with Rizwan, Usama Mir and Nawaz by the time they had both finished their 10 over allotment.
Oh, gone. Stumped. This is such good bowling. Zampa is fired up.
Stark and Cummins putting the final nails in the coffin in the 46th over. Pakistan all out for 305. Australia winning a vital match by 62 runs and a tactical victory for Pat Cummins. Australia's batting had started to fire, well, the openers at least. Their next match would be against the Netherlands, and it would be remembered for one thing in particular. It wasn't that David Warner had scored another century, although it was a great knock, or that Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne both got past 50, or that Australia scored its highest total of the tournament, 399 after 50. It was that Glenn Maxwell, coming in with around 10 overs to go, and Australia 5 for 267 would go on to make a century in a scintillating 40-ball onslaught that would become the fastest century in World Cup history. An innings that was spared on 26, but ended after a bevy of reverse sweeps, reverse slogs, and just outright power.
And again, Glenn Maxwell goes to 100. And on the same ground and the same pitch as Aidan Markram set the record not long ago, Maxwell has obliterated it. He has now picked up the fastest World Cup 100 of all time, just 40 deliveries.
He was finally caught in the deep for 106 after Australia had made a massive total. It seemed like a total that was probably too much for the Netherlands before they even came out to bat. There were some great shots, even showing how far the Netherlands had come as a team, but a run rate of 8 from ball 1 is hard for anyone. Australia, from their bowling to the fielding and the catches, were thoroughly professional. The Netherlands were bowled all out for 90, losing by 309 runs. It was the largest ever victory by a team in World Cup history. Australia's middle order slowly but surely finding its feet, along with a now in-form Adam Zampa, who had 3 4-wicket hauls in consecutive matches. 3 wins on the trot and hopes of reaching the top 4 and a semi-final berth, slowly getting back on track. But coming up next was another team that was seeking a similar berth, who were keen to make their way to the final after a heartbreaking loss 4 years earlier. And the meeting of these two massive teams, Australia and New Zealand, would culminate in my pick for the best contest of the entire World Cup. As we moved into the foothills of the Himalayas in Dharamshala, Australia were about to welcome a massive part of their team back from injury. Travis Head had recovered from that fractured hand he picked up in South Africa. Not only did his presence give Australia another devastating bat at the top of the order, but a handy spin option for Pat Cummins as this tournament wore on. It meant that even though Warner and Marsh had that awesome partnership in the earlier game, Marsh was moved down to 3, while Marcus Stoinis was omitted altogether. New Zealand had played at that ground 6 days earlier against India, where India, deciding to bowl first, had won. Swing and seam were both evident, and Mohammad Shami took a 5-for. This might have actually influenced the decision that New Zealand would make here and now, to follow India's suit in bowling first. But this pitch played much better for the batters, the bounce in particular. Australia flew out of the blocks. David Warner took only 28 balls to reach his half century, off back-to-back centuries in the previous 2 games. Travis Head too, first game back or not, scored his first 50 of the tournament off 25 balls. Australia were past 100 for no loss by the end of the 9th over, and New Zealand turned to spin from both ends. perhaps trying to slow the runs down. It brought chances, but ones that weren't taken. For the second time in 3 games, Australia reached 150 runs for no loss. But it would only last for 25 more runs. With Glenn Phillips getting Warner out for 80, it was 1 for 175.
Straight back to Phillips. New Zealand had broken through.
It was an amazing start, and a start that Australia needed. 400 plus was surely the goal. However, although Travis Head would make his way to 109 off 67, that nagging issue of middle order runs continued for Australia. New Zealand's spin trios chipped away, backing up the opening 2 wickets, with Marsh, Smith and Labuschagne all going for 72 runs between them, even with the reprieve thrown into the mix. It had also eaten up a fair few deliveries, meaning that by the time Maxwell, Inglis and Cummins came to the crease, there was roughly around 11 overs to go. Chances came, but again, chances were dropped. Precious runs were added to the total before Australia were finally bowled all out for 388. A big score, no doubt, but had either team made most of their opportunities for middle order runs or taking the chances they were given, the innings might have looked a bit different. On top of gaining vital points in this World Cup, if New Zealand reached this total, it would be the largest run chase in ODI World Cup history. It began from the first over with 2 boundaries, a wayward opening over from Stark earning them 12 runs. These 2 initial boundaries would start a steady trickle of 4s and 6s that would continue throughout the entire innings. 2 more from Hazelwood's first over before 5 wides from Stark. At the end of the 6th, New Zealand's run rate is already over 9, above what was required. A long way to go, but a very good start. Cummins, the captain, had to be on his game to nip this in the bud. He turned to that same trick of cycling bowlers that he used against Pakistan, but kept Hazelwood on from one end. It would be Hazelwood twice with Stark catching that would combine to dismiss the opening partnership.
It's Chanel, same guy. The same guy's done it again.
New Zealand 2 for 72 after the first 10 over power play. It wasn't the blazing start of Australia, but it kept them in touch of the required run rate. Remember, Australia's middle order did not keep up the pace of their opening 2 batters. And for New Zealand, now at the crease was Daryl Mitchell and one of the newest stars of New Zealand cricket, Rachin Ravindra. Both had scored over 50 in their previous match here versus India, Mitchell scoring 130. And so began the next arm wrestle. New Zealand's 2 batters scored runs, aiming to keep in touch of the run rate, while Pat Cummins and his arsenal of bowlers looked for wickets. For the next 10 overs, New Zealand were winning it. That trickle of boundaries kept coming. And when they were stopped for an over, New Zealand would run instead or make it up in the next one. Cummins' bowling changes weren't having the same effect. It would be down to one of his bowlers, Adam Zampa, while getting hit for 2 boundaries in that same over no less, to finally get Daryl Mitchell to hit one down long on's throat. At 2 for 159, Australia got the breakthrough, and Stark, although not having the best day with the ball, now had held 3 massive chances. That didn't stop Ravindra from attacking, now well on his way to 3 figures. Tom Latham had joined him in the middle for 21 runs of his own before Zampa got him out off a reverse sweep. The equation was now 165 needed off 108. The required run rate roughly 9.5 and over. A new batter came in, but still 4s and 6s kept coming. Ravindra hits his 2nd century of this World Cup off 77 balls.
World Cup 100 for this young man. Talent in abundance.
More and more pressure now on Rachin's shoulders as that trickle of boundaries was now accompanied by regular wickets. The wicket that Australia needed was the next to go. Ravindra finally caught in the deep off Cummins' bowling. New Zealand's hopes appeared shattered in that 40th over. 6 down with 90 needed off less than 10 overs, and only 4 batters left. Some might have thought that this was the start of the end, but to do so would discount the fighting spirit of this New Zealand side, and the fact that still at the crease was a man who, 4 years earlier, was this close to winning a World Cup, Jimmy Neesham. This wasn't over, not just yet. Neesham couldn't find that partner to go with him, but it appeared as though he didn't need it. With every wicket that fell, he kept hitting 4s and 6s.
That's glorious. Absolutely glorious. That's as good as we've seen today.
We reached the final 3 overs. New Zealand need 43 off 18, and Neesham smacks Stark for a 6 over long on. But no more boundaries are scored on that over. 32 now needed off 12. Bolt somehow scores off 6 with some help from Labuschagne. Neesham with a boundary 2 off that same over. 19 off 6 are now needed. Another piece of drama would go in their favour. Australia have been penalised for a slow over rate. They now needed to have 5 fielders inside the circle. Mitchell Starc had the final over. A single in the first ball is followed by 5 wides for the next, 13 off 5 and then 11 off 4. Neesham somehow might pull this off, and in most other situations he probably would have. But that night, Pat Cummins and Australia wouldn't let it happen. Those remaining 4 fielders outside the circle were placed in perfect positions. They might have been forced to cover large parts of the outfield almost on their own, but it was their determination and the hard work of their teammates backing up that would finally stop that pesky trickle of boundaries. A straight drive is bashed down the ground only to be slowed by Starc and stopped by a diving Glenn Maxwell, relaying the ball to his teammate for a throw back in. The next was middled through mid-wicket, flying towards the boundary, only for the desperation of Marnus Labuschagne and the backing up of Travis Head to stop it. 2 boundaries saved, 9 needed off 3. A full toss then gets quickly to Marnus, who quickly releases it back to the keeper. Neesham knew that if he didn't get the boundary, he needed to get back on strike, but there was hesitation in the middle. Marnus's throw reaches the gloves of Inglis, who dives to dislodge the bails, with Neesham at full stretch and ultimately short of his crease. Jimmy Neesham gets New Zealand right to the edge, only to fall achingly short once again. There was 1 ball left with 6 needed, but New Zealand's tailenders were unable to get it over the boundary. Another Australia-New Zealand nail-biter and a bona fide World Cup classic. In the foothills of the Himalayas, Australia gets over the line just. Victory by 5 runs. Australia had overcome arguably their biggest remaining challenge in the group stage. But with 3 games to make the finals, no games can truly be taken for granted in these World Cups, especially ones that are against an old enemy. It was the second time this year that Australia would go toe-to-toe with England, albeit in different colours. Defending champions England had found the tournament a real struggle, losing 5 of their last 6 games, all but extinguishing any hopes of back-to-back crowns. But it doesn't need to be said that both of these teams would love a chance to spoil each other's fortunes. Here, Australia could knock England out of the World Cup, while England could make semi-final qualifications all the more difficult for the Aussies. Australia's openers had raced out of the blocks in the last 3 matches, setting up the rest of the innings. But at the Narendra Modi International Stadium, they weren't afforded that luxury. Like we saw in the Ashes, Chris Woakes would strike against Travis Head and David Warner, both getting out cheaply. Australia's middle order would have no security blanket in this match. To make a competitive total, they, starting with Steve Smith and Marnus Labuschagne, would have to do most of the heavy lifting themselves. Run scoring was tough going, although for run accumulators like Smith and Labuschagne, that might have actually made things slightly simpler. 300 plus might not have actually been needed here to win. Running between the wickets would be the main source of runs in their 75 run partnership, bolstered by the odd 4 here and there. But the criminally underrated spin of Adil Rashid would dismiss Smith for 44, with Inglis going shortly afterwards for 3. Australia in trouble, 4 for 117. Marnus and Cameron Green would combine for 61 runs of their own. Another nemesis from earlier this year would dismiss Marnus short of his century, pinned in front by Mark Wood for 71. The rest could truly be called a team effort. It was the type of innings that they had been on the receiving end of during the Ashes. Batters 6 through 11 all chipping in together for 108 runs, to push the total to a defendable score. Whether it was the 35 smash by Marcus Stoinis or a gutsy 29 by Adam Zampa, every run, by bat alone or by foot, was important. 286 wasn't a massive total, but on a low scoring pitch that they would probably see more of as this World Cup went on, it gave them vital experience for future matches. England now had to chase 287 to win, and it was the batting side of their game that had been found wanting the most in this World Cup. Their innings would begin with the worst possible start. Bairstow out for a first ball golden duck off a slightly wayward Starc delivery. Starc's second would be Joe Root, but only thanks to Marnus Labuschagne. Marnus hears an edge where no one else does, and pleads for a review, which pays off to the delight and maybe surprise of Aussies everywhere. England's lone shining light arguably of the tournament was Dawid Malan, who continued this fine form partnering with Ben Stokes for a rebuild. Malan reached his 50 only to be dismissed 2 balls later at 3 for 103. Zampa is brought on to dismiss Butler 3 overs later. After working so hard to get back in the game, wickets were starting to fall again, and that run rate continued to grow. Now needing 7.5, nearly 8 runs and over, an injured Stokes puts pain to the back of his mind to trudge on. Moeen Ali, a handy partner. They managed for the next 9 or so overs to keep in touch of the rate, until that man again, Adam Zampa, would get another.
No! Out! Zampa, as he so often does, gets the big wicket.
A lion-hearted Ben Stokes out for 64. England on the verge of being eliminated from the World Cup. England's efforts to keep up with an unrelenting run rate results in boundaries, but also wickets. That 286 total is just too much for the English, as they're bowled out for 253 in the 48th over, and become the latest team that won't make the semis. Australia had 2 final games in the World Cup with 10 points next to their name. It was now a case of making sure that they finish as high as possible. Afghanistan were their next opponents. It had been a coming of age for this Afghanistan team, having won 3 matches so far, their most ever in a World Cup. They had an outside chance of making the last semi-final spot, but only if they won their final 2 matches. This game had potential upset written all over it. What it turned into was a demonstration of not only how far Afghanistan have come as an international side, but a demonstration of just how much this World Cup means to this Australian team, and what some of them are willing to put themselves through to obtain it. Game 39 of the ICC World Cup saw Australia, for the first time in this tournament, play at Mumbai's Wankhede Stadium. The weather was forecast to be in the mid to high 30s and humid. Even into the evening, it was only expected to drop to the low 30s. After the toss, Afghanistan must have been thanking their captain as he won it and sent Australia straight into the field. Stark and Hazlewood started with a few tight overs, but Afghanistan's openers showed the standard of their stroke making on any loose deliveries. The outfield was lightning quick. Trying to help a ball to the leg side, Ramanala Gurbaz picks one up and guides it directly to a waiting Stark on the boundary. A missed opportunity to capitalise on a good start. His partner Ibrahim Zadran didn't make the same mistake, scoring his second ODI World Cup 50, becoming Afghanistan's anchor for the rest of the innings. Their batters, time and time again, would make starts but wouldn't capitalise further. On the other hand, Zadran's innings was one of timing, of poise, and of true class. He would score his and Afghanistan's first ever century in a World Cup, a moment he'll no doubt never forget, of 130 balls, the total getting closer and closer to 250. In the death overs, we truly started to see the strain that conditions had brought on the players in the field. Rashid Khan hitting Glenn Maxwell to the boundary in his 10th over of bowling. Zadran and Khan would be Afghanistan's final batters as the 50 over mark came up, posting a comprehensive score of 291, their highest ever ODI World Cup score. As the sun set over the ocean and the lights took hold in Mumbai, Afghanistan went to work, opening the first over with spin. The first ball of the innings would go for 4. It was a wild one, but ever so slightly, it moved sideways in the air. There was swing. Past Afghanistan teams have been known for their strength, even their over-reliance on spin bowling, but it was the pace attack today using this swing that would tear through much of Australia's batting order. Head was the first victim with a Naveen Ul-Haq Jaffa. As Mitch Marsh had done all tournament, he fought fire with fire. Naveen was getting wider and wider on the crease and homing the ball in on his pads, with one finally striking. Afghanistan's first change, Azmatullah Omarzai, would join in, swinging in one from around the wicket to take Warner's pegs.
Azmat castles him, and Australia are in big trouble.
In the 8th over, Australia were 3 for 49 and this early swing bowling was, at times, unplayable. Josh Inglis goes the next ball. Marnus hits a nice few shots himself, but was caught hesitating between the wickets and run out. The part of his bat that was in the crease was in the air. Australia's 5 down. With the match moving into the middle overs, that prodigious swing was starting to lessen, and Afghanistan's spinners were in the game, their biggest star getting himself in on the action. Stoinis was gone, followed by this weird wicket. Stark was given out to an amazing catch, but he didn't actually hit it. The ball hit the stumps and the umpire must have heard a sound and given it out. No review was taken. Everything, it seemed, was going Afghanistan's way. Australia was into their tail without even getting into triple figures yet. Pat Cummins, now at the crease, accompanied by a very special player. A player who is, for me, one of the most talented all-round cricketers that Australia has ever produced, but one who could frustrate Aussie fans with his batting performances in the green and gold, as his exploits on the T20 circuit had earned him legions of loyal fans. I'm talking about Glenn Maxwell. He was there, and by extension, Australia still had a chance, even if you needed a microscope to see it. Luck would finally go Australia's way in the 22nd over. Maxwell on 26 would get 2 reprieves in an over, an overturned LBW followed by a dropped catch, Maxwell hitting a boundary in response off Rashid Khan.
Oh yes, the fight's on.
What started off slowly with a hard run single or two, a boundary here or a 6 there, would gain momentum with every passing over. Maxwell scores 50 off 51 balls. They were 7 down and keeping pace with Afghanistan's innings. The 4s and 6s keep coming, with a half chance thrown in but not taken, before Maxwell brings up a century off 76 balls. The oppressive weather conditions were finally taking its toll on Australia's last big hope. After receiving treatment for what at first looked like cramps, he soldiered on. More running between the wickets, more 4s and more 6s, with the target growing ever nearer. Maxwell then received more treatment for back spasms. It was getting worse. But would it be enough for him to retire? Not on your life. From that point on, he could barely run. But somehow the runs kept coming. No matter how much the spasms were affecting him, even growing to the point of full body spasms and him lying frozen on the field for a time, he would get up and soldier on. His supreme hand-eye coordination, his ability to get under a ball with ease, and timing that sent balls to the boundary with interest, all coming to the fore. It didn't matter that his feet were sometimes stuck to the ground like they were in concrete. If there was a gap, he was hitting it. And everyone in the stadium and around the world watched, spellbound, dumbfounded and aghast at this display of resolve and sheer hitting. By the 46th over, Australia had the total in sight. Maxwell was 195 of 127 balls, 5 needed to win, and in true Glenn Maxwell fashion, the big show finished with a bang.
And Maxwell hits it high! Can it make it? It does make it! Glenn Maxwell! Unbelievable! The most remarkable thing you'll probably ever see in cricket!
They had pulled off the impossible, with at one point having 3 wickets in hand, chasing over 200 runs to win. The world witnessed an innings, the likes of which they might not ever see again. Glenn Maxwell, after scoring the fastest ODI century in history a few games earlier, now had the fastest double century too, as well as the highest Australian ODI score in World Cup history. A one-of-a-kind innings in every sense of the word. Before we move on, one final thing. I want to pay tribute to the unsung hero of that innings, Pat Cummins. Glenn Maxwell will rightfully be remembered in the history books with that knock, but it wouldn't have been possible without Pat's 12 of 68. His calm presence, making sure that Maxie had the opportunity to do what he did, and not leaving it to someone else. A true captain's knock, even if it was only for 12. This game made Australia's opponents stand up and take notice. They had been slightly discounted after those first 2 losses, and with fair reason, so off the pace with dropped catches and lethargic fielding. But with every match since then, the momentum kept building and building, and Bangladesh would be the unlucky team to face Australia last in the group stage. It was a comprehensive victory in Pune, where Bangladesh were restricted to 306 on a batting-friendly wicket. Only one Bangladesh batter got past 50, as Australia's fielding came to the fore with 3 run-outs. Australia would reach the total with 5 overs to spare, only going 2 wickets down, Warner and Smith both scoring 50s, while Mitch Marsh made the number 3 spot his own, smashing his highest ever ODI score, 177 not out, Australia the victors by 8 wickets.
Lofted down the ground, boundary for Smith, Mitch Marsh sees Australia home.
After long last, we reached the deep end of this World Cup. The semi-finals were now upon us. Australia finished 3rd on 14 points. Those 9 matches, 7 wins and 2 losses had gotten them fighting fit for higher honours. Their first finals target was South Africa. Now this fixture, South Africa vs Australia in World Cup finals, holds memories for both teams. Good or bad depending on the side. South Africa's 99 World Cup semi-final loss to Australia is often pointed to as where their tags as World Cup chokers began. World Cups have come and gone since then, but that tag has still remained. This match was another chance to move past this and win a World Cup crown at long last. And it is that same World Cup semi-final that still stands for Australia as one of its greatest cricketing moments.
It's going to be run out. Oh, that's it. South Africa out. Donald didn't run.
Great Australian teams of the past did not simply win by their supreme batting and bowling talents, although granted, having all-time greats definitely helps. It comes in large part down to mentality, an attitude of imposing relentless pressure on the opposition, of making them earn every little thing that they do with ball or bat. It almost manifests itself as an aura around the team, that they are in total control and they will dictate how the match goes. Australia had not been able to consistently do this for a very long time. For me, I'm talking years. Even this year, in the previous parts of this series, we've seen where games have been left to drift, creating openings that ultimately led to defeats. But an ICC tournament and the site of where Australia's first World Cup was won was as good a place as any to get this aura back. Australia was sent into the field as Mitchell Starc opened the bowling. In this World Cup, he had been off his best. While wickets had come for him, they were also accompanied by runs and extras. Today, Starc set the tone for the field, needing 5 balls to get his first wicket. Captain Temba Bavuma gone for a duck. Hazlewood backs him up with 1 run off the next over. Quinton de Kock had 4 centuries in this World Cup already, but he couldn't get away in this opening stanza. In these first few overs, there was nothing he or South Africa could get on top of. Even when a ball was hit, there was a fielder there to stop the boundary. Pressure building already. De Kock getting stifled for 3 off 13 finally takes a risk, with Captain Cummins there to pounce.
He takes it. Brilliant catching.
South Africa 2 for 8 in the 6th over. A boundary would eventually come after 52 balls, and only after many were stopped before it. Markram gets another before Starc gets him. Van der Dusen was then gone the next over, 4 for 24. It looked like a test match pitch. Even 4 down, batting first still didn't look like a bad decision, because it was only going to get worse to bat on. The inclusion of Heinrich Klaasen and David Miller at the crease coincides with the change of bowling. Pat Cummins bringing himself on, and South Africa get 2 boundaries, before a rain delay stops proceedings. If this was a test, we would say that that was Australia's session. Pressure cricket putting South Africa in a deep hole. When the covers came off 40 minutes later, it was more of the same. The run rate was staying below 4 and over. Great bowling and fielding, but no wickets were falling. The odd 4 and 6 making sure that the rate didn't get any lower. 4 for 79 off 25 overs. South Africa somehow needed to accelerate, and they targeted Zampa, hitting 3 sixes off him in 2 overs. Finally, some pressure back on Australia. Pat Cummins takes him off and throws the ball to Travis Head. It looks like a horrible decision at first. 2 4s in the first 2 balls, and then he gets 2 wickets in 2 balls.
Turn, and he's right in front of the stumps.
Just as South Africa starts to get away, Australia pulls them back in. With Klaasen gone, Miller played through the innings, and with some lower order support, he bludgeons his way to 101 off 116. Those numbers make it look like a steady accumulated innings, but it was 8 4s and 5 6s that got him there. He was the only batter that could stand up to Australia's suffocating display, getting the Proteas to 212 before being bowled out. 212, it should be an easy chase, right? Think again. The small totals are always the trickiest, and this would be no exception. South Africa were going to come out swinging. They saw the earlier swing and seam on offer, but Travis Head and David Warner still needed to make the most of this new ball, while there's still decent bounce in it, to make batting easier. South Africa weren't able to heap that same type of pressure on Australia in the first 6 overs. A flurry of 4s and 6s getting Australia to none for 60. The introduction of spin would get the breakthrough. 1 brought 2 with a Van der Dusen special.
Taken! What a catch that is! Van der Dusen flies!
Great catch. These wickets needed to keep falling to keep them in this. Travis Head never slows down, reaching his 50 and then gets lucky. On 62, that luck ended. A peach. Like World Cup semis of the past, here in Kolkata, the evening conditions brought spin into the game. South Africa aren't out of this. Who better than Smith and Labuschagne to have at the crease? There's plenty of deliveries left. They just needed to be watchful and whittled away the score. Shamsi had other ideas. He would lure Marnus into a reverse sweep to open up that end, and get one to stay down and over later, dismissing Maxwell.
Maxwell swamping across the line.
Australia still 76 away from the total. While spin was weaving its magic, Josh Inglis came on and cut an assured figure, making batting look easy at that tricky time. The total getting below 40 and Australia pulling away. It would be raw velocity that would twist this game back into South Africa's favour. Inglis and Stark got the score to within 25 before another could see a wicket. A vital Inglis innings that fell just short. After the ball goes under the bat and into the wickets. There's just over 10 overs left and Australia have 3 wickets in hand. Only 20 runs were needed for an Australian finals berth. But it felt like 100 with the pressure at the ground. Coetzee never gives up. By the end of the spell, he would have bowled 8 overs of raw pace in a row, an effort itself worth mentioning, just to keep South Africa alive. But even this gargantuan effort wasn't enough. Pat Cummins, with a bat in his hand, yet again is at the crease in a crunch situation, hitting the winning boundary, a low-scoring thriller worthy of this rich rivalry and a World Cup semi-final. Australia through to the World Cup final and South Africa fall agonisingly short yet again. Australia had reached the final match of this World Cup, the final match of what had been a gruelling away season. And yet, after travelling around the world in a season of ups and downs, we are back to where we started, in India against India. They might have lost the Border Gavaskar trophy, but they had one final chance to deny India a trophy that looked destined for their grasp from their first match of this World Cup. India had not lost a game in this tournament. Their journey to the final seemed like a procession at times. They had the 2 highest scorers of the tournament and the highest wicket taker in Mohammad Shami, who played just 7 matches and had got a 7 in the semi-final. The final would be played at the vast Narendra Modi International Stadium in Ahmedabad amidst an expected sellout crowd, 99% of which would be going for India. Before rivers of Indian blue streamed into the stadium to watch the final, there was already furious amounts of work going on behind the scenes. Ahmedabad's modern stadium had an interesting feature that added a quirk to this match. Its collection of cricket pitches weren't all made up of the same type of soil. In fact, there was a variety, using either a black soil, a red soil, or a mixture of the two. It meant that where many grounds worldwide have one typical way of behaving, the decision of which pitch would be used for this game would play a big part on how proceedings would play out, because of the unique soil characteristics. Adding more interest is the fact that where a brand new pitch is typically used for World Cup finals, this match would be played on a used surface. The same surface that saw India bowl Pakistan out for 191 and win earlier in the tournament, meaning a slow pitch with predominantly black soil was being used for this match. These developments didn't faze the Australian backroom staff though. They had already come up with a plan, keeping this information in mind, and gave their advice to Pat Cummins. It was advice that might have surprised most of the cricketing world, but Captain Cummins knew what he wanted to do. Matches in this World Cup had typically favoured teams that batted first, and it was conventional wisdom that batting first would be the best decision on this match, for whichever captain won the toss. But with guidance of his backroom team in mind, Pat Cummins wins the toss and bowls first. I have to admit, I was one of the many that were a bit uneasy with this decision. Rohit Sharma himself said that at the toss he would have batted anyway. It would be the first indicator of how this match would go. India, with their choice of batting first for field, did what they had been doing to every team in this World Cup. They hit boundaries. Rohit Sharma happy to go to the pitch of the ball and smack it to the fence. There was no panic from the Australians though. While Hazelwood's second over went for 12, Stark would get Gill to hit to mid-on. The 2 batting giants of this team, Rohit and Virat, perhaps in their last World Cup, thundered on like the dismissal never happened. The weight of runs was building on Australia. 60 already scored before the first power play ended. It only takes one chance though. One miss hit for Australia to pounce. Travis Head to stop Rohit from getting to 50.
Could this be a moment? Could it? One of the great catches under pressure.
Cummins, now facing a new batter, gets another. Advantage Australia. Australia's hunger in the field began to show. For the next 16 overs, there would be no boundaries, while a mixture of spin, into the pitch bowling and changes of pace made best use of the slow nature of this surface. Virat Kohli and KL Rahul showed their class even without boundaries, picking away at gaps, slowly rebuilding India's innings. Kohli gets to a half century and there's a 60-run partnership between the two. Though it wasn't Virat's day for another century. The pitch would keep one low, Kohli bowled for 54, India 4 for 148 in the 29th. 30 more runs would be added before a bit of reverse swing would snag Ravi Jadeja. India not only found it hard to add runs to the board, but the reverse swing and the low bounce made batting difficult in general. KL Rahul, the set batter, was snagged by Stark on 66. The India crowd, by now, silenced. The tail couldn't create a partnership together as Australia cleaned them up, India finishing with 240 runs, a score well below their expectations. Remember that piece of information before the game? That one that Australia's backroom staff gave to Pat Cummins? Well, let me quickly tell you now, roughly what it was. It started in their first World Cup game in Chennai, where India beat them and where they had a chance to win, but a dropped catch cost them dearly. It's almost at the other end of the country, but like here, tonight in Ahmedabad, it was on a pitch that uses black soil. They reasoned from that game that batting second, even if no one else thought this way, would be easier than batting first. The ball will turn in the afternoon, but in the evening, under lights, it'll start to flatten out. A chance of dew might even help them more. Now let's see if they were right. The ball was swinging massively in the first over. Head would get his eye in quickly, but Warner couldn't. Shami with the early breakthrough.
It's taken! Shami gets the big wicket!
The swing kept coming through the first power play, and the Indian bowlers were having a hard time controlling it at times. That low bounce that hurt so many Indian batters would be the end of Mitch Marsh as well, who looked good for 15. India still in with a chance at 2 for 41. The crowd now back in play. Bumrah had his tail up and dismissed the huge wicket of Steve Smith on single digits. A mini middle order collapse at the worst time was underway. But as quickly as the swing appeared with the fielders around the bat, the swing would evaporate as the first power play ended. With every boundary that was scored, the field would become more and more spread out. Clean hitting getting full reward towards the boundary. Pace, spin, left arm, right arm, India couldn't find an answer as Australia's total climbed. As Marnus Labuschagne held down an end to tick over the strike, Travis Head was adding to the score in multiples of 4 and 6. A man who had a fractured hand coming into this World Cup and an old reputation of being unable to handle conditions in the subcontinent.
Head lofts him away, times it nicely, again silent!
Bringing a century up in 95 balls. This puts his name alongside the greats of our sport, Lloyd, De Silva, Ponting, Jayawardena, to name a few, to score a century in a World Cup final. More 4s and more 6s filled the scorecard, the packed crowd beginning to file out before the game was even over. The outcome all but assured. Travis Head would get to 137 before falling 2 agonising runs short of the total. How ironic. But never mind, the damage was done. Glenn Maxwell would score the winning runs as Australia became, for the 6th time, World Cup champions.
And in front of 120,000 people, they've upstaged the home team.
Before you go, I know a lot of you would have seen my video on the 99 World Cup victory, and some even left a comment. Thanks for that, by the way. The similarities, on the surface at least, are as clear as day. Both lost 2 matches at the start of the World Cup, but didn't lose again. Both were off the pace at the start, then pulled off amazing comebacks. By the time the finals came around, they found another level and they were a different beast altogether. But as we've seen through this 3-part video journey, to isolate this achievement to just this World Cup wouldn't do it justice. It wouldn't take into account the environment around Australian cricket when Cummins became captain, in the wake of so much controversy. It would exclude how Pat Cummins was not only the first ever fast bowling captain for Australia, but that this was Pat's first time at all as a full-time professional cricket captain. It wouldn't show how the missed test opportunities of India and England came as harsh lessons to this team, but they were things that Pat Cummins and this team would grow from, where even as Australia were off the pace in this tournament, their dedication to the green and gold and to each other saw them pull off this amazing victory, achieving their moment of cricketing immortality. They speak to determination, to hard work, and to a team mentality. Things that, more than just success alone, should always be at the heart of Australian cricket. These guys deserve their success, but not as a harkening back to an earlier golden age, but potentially as the start of a new one. And what's funny, to me at least, is that throughout all of this 2023 and the baptism of fire that they have just experienced, the Australian cricket team may have just found itself again.